Welcome children to our social studies class. Children, we were doing second chapter from geography, that is the atmosphere. We had finished with first half of the chapter. Now we have to continue with the remaining part. On page number 13 children, we have to start with the topic greenhouse effect and global warming. Now children, you all are aware of that solar energy which is received from the sun that heats up the surface of our planet Earth. Okay, and once that surface gets heated, it radiates the heat. Radiates means it sends out the heat. Now much of this radiated heat, that means emitted heat, is reflected towards the earth. Reflected means to throw back. Okay, so again it is thrown back to our planet Earth mainly by the carbon dioxide which is present in the atmosphere, and as a result what happens, this heat gets trapped over there. Okay, and this effect is very similar to the heating of greenhouse, and that is why it is known as the greenhouse effect. Now without this trapping of heat children, the earth would have been so cold at night, extremely cold at night, that we could not have survived on it. Okay, this is because of the greenhouse effect. Greenhouse effect keeps the earth warm, okay, so that we can survive. Now in the next paragraph, what they are telling, see. You know that green plants absorb carbon dioxide and release oxygen during photosynthesis. You all must be aware of photosynthesis, in which green plants absorb which gas? Carbon dioxide, and release oxygen. Next, they are also telling children that as the human population is growing, we are cutting down more and more trees. Deforestation. Okay, why we are cutting down more and more trees? For wood. Then we are clearing the forests for using that land for the construction work, okay, for the construction of buildings, okay, then for using that land for agricultural purposes. Our factories and vehicles are emitting more carbon dioxide than ever before. Now, in other words, what they are trying to tell children, that we are increasing the emission of carbon dioxide. Okay, we are increasing the amount of carbon dioxide in the air by these activities. Okay, but on the other hand, we are reducing the number of trees. We are cutting down the trees for the purpose of wood, for the construction purpose, for agricultural purpose. And gradually what happens is the amount of carbon dioxide in the air increases, which increases the greenhouse effect. Okay, and that thing causes global temperatures to rise. This is known as global warming. So did you all understand children, that instead of cutting down the trees, we should grow more and more trees, because if we will cut down the trees, the amount of carbon dioxide in the air will increase, which will increase the greenhouse effect. Okay, and that will raise the global temperatures. Next children, they are also telling that much of the polar ice would melt because of this global warming. Okay, and because of melting of this polar ice, the water level of the oceans will increase, and many islands and coastal areas will get submerged. Now our next topic of discussion children is atmospheric pressure and winds. Now children, if you will look around yourself, each and everything has weight. Okay, same way air also has weight. Although air weighs very little, although its weight is not much, but if we are talking about all the air in the atmosphere, then the weight is huge. Okay, this huge weight pushes down on the Earth's surface. but fortunately it is spread over a large area. The weight of the atmosphere pushing down on a unit area on the Earth's surface is called atmospheric pressure. So in simple words, if I define children, the air around you has weight, okay? And it presses against everything it touches. That pressure is called atmospheric pressure, or you can call it as air pressure, okay? It is basically the force exerted on a surface by the air above it as gravity pulls it to Earth. Understood, all of you? Then they are also telling that this atmospheric pressure is measured with the help of a barometer. Understood? Now, another important point which they are discussing under this topic, children, is that atmospheric pressure decreases with increasing altitude. Understood? With increasing height, the air pressure decreases because the atmosphere is densest near the Earth's surface. And as one climbs higher, जैसे जैसे हम ऊपर की तरफ जाते हैं, we climb higher, the air becomes less dense. And therefore, it exerts less pressure. So, as the pressure decreases, the amount of oxygen available to breathe also decreases. Understood? So, at very high altitudes, atmospheric pressure and available oxygen get so low that the people can become sick. Understood? That is why the mountain climbers, they use bottled oxygen with them. Understood? Now, our next topic of discussion is permanent pressure belts. See, air pressure, or you can say atmospheric pressure, it varies with temperature. Varies means it differs with temperature. Okay. When air is heated, it expands. And along with expansion, it becomes less dense. Okay. Hot air, because it is lighter, children, it rises. Okay. Or you can say it flows upwards. And it exerts lesser pressure. Understood? Because it is lighter. Then on the other hand, if we talk about the cooled air, okay, air when cooled, it becomes dense and heavy. When the air is cooled, okay, it is just the opposite of hot air. It becomes more dense and heavier. And because it is heavier, it flows downwards, or you can say it sinks. And again, because it is heavier, it exerts more pressure. Understood? Now next they are talking about low pressure belt and high pressure belt. See, the equatorial region, as you all know, it receives the direct rays of the sun. It remains hot throughout the year. Okay, so that is why here the atmospheric pressure is always low. This low pressure zone is called the equatorial low pressure belt. Okay. Whereas children, if we talk about the polar regions, there you all are aware of that the sun's rays are slanting. So it is extremely cold throughout the year in these regions. Okay. So the atmospheric pressure is always high over here. That is why these regions are called polar high pressure belts. Now in the next paragraph, what they are telling children, see, as we discussed that equatorial region, okay, there the atmospheric pressure is always low. That is why it is known as equatorial low pressure belt. Okay, so here from here children, the hot air rises, okay, and it moves towards the poles. Now by the time the air streams reach the latitudes around 30 degree north and 30 degrees south, they become cool. And as it becomes cool, it becomes heavier and then it begins to sink, that we discussed. This creates belts of high pressure known as the subtropical high pressure belts in these two regions. Understood? Now what happens? Cold air from the polar regions. Okay, polar regions are extremely cold throughout the year. So the cold air from these regions and comparatively warm air from the subtropical regions which we did just now, okay, they meet. These two air meet, cold and comparatively warm air. Okay, and where do they meet? They meet near the 60-degree latitudes in both the hemispheres, northern hemisphere and southern hemisphere. Okay. Now, the larger mass of this warm air, children, it rises, okay, and it creates a strong upward current which pulls the cold air, okay, and this creates belts of low pressure which are called the subpolar low pressure belts in these regions. Now, in the next paragraph, children, they are telling that these permanent pressure belts, they don't remain at the same position for the whole year. When the northern hemisphere is tilted towards the sun, then they shift northward, okay, slightly northward. And when southern hemisphere is tilted towards the sun, then they shift a little bit southward. Now, our next topic is wind. Now, what is wind, children? See, when hot air rises, okay, it creates an area, a region of low pressure. Then the cold air from the nearby areas, from the neighboring high pressure areas, that cold air moves towards the low pressure area which is created by the hot air. Okay. The horizontal movement of this air is called wind. Now, for recording the direction from which a wind is blowing, children, which instrument is used? Wind vane. Okay, and what does that instrument consists of is given in that first paragraph. Okay, then in the next para they are talking about the speed of the wind. Now here, children, they are telling that the speed of the wind, what does it depend on? It depends on the pressure difference between the two regions. Okay, when the difference is high, then the wind rushes from the high pressure area to low pressure area. With a great speed it rushes, okay, as in the case of a storm. Then the speed of wind, children, is measured with the help of an instrument known as anemometer. Okay, again they are discussing about this instrument, that what does it consists of. You can read out the same. Okay, now here in the last two lines they are telling that winds can be broadly classified as permanent winds and local winds. Now let us study about the same. Now talking about permanent winds. Permanent winds are also known as prevailing winds or planetary winds. Okay. Now, the winds which blow from permanent high pressure belts towards which area? Towards the permanent low pressure belts. They maintain their directions of flow. Understood? Throughout the year, for the whole year, they maintain their direction of flowing. Okay. From where they are blowing, again I am repeating, they blow from permanent high pressure belts towards the permanent low pressure belts. Understood? So they are called permanent winds. Then they are discussing about the three types of permanent winds which we will study now: trade winds, westerlies, and the polar winds. Now talking about the trade winds, children. Trade winds blow from which area? They blow from subtropical high pressure belt to equatorial low pressure belt. Understood? Then they are telling, children, that winds are given names. They are named after the direction from which they are blowing. Okay, and trade winds, basically they blow with great regularity. Then talking about the westerlies. Now these winds, children, that means the westerlies, they blow from subtropical high pressure belt to subpolar low pressure belts. Okay, and why are they known as westerlies? Because they blow from a somewhat westerly direction in both the hemispheres, that is the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere. And they are also adding up that they are not as regular as trade winds, that we studied in the trade winds, that the trade winds blow with great regularity, but westerlies are not as regular as the trade winds. Now talking about the third type of permanent wind. Okay, still we are doing the permanent winds, children. Okay, so talking about the third type, that is polar winds. Now the polar winds blow from polar high pressure belts to the subpolar low pressure belts. Okay, and these winds, children, they originate in polar regions. Okay, and you all are aware of that it is extremely cold over there. Okay, so these winds are extremely cold. Understood? These polar winds, children, they are also known as polar easterlies. Why? Because they blow from a somewhat easterly direction. Like in westerlies we studied. Yes, same way over here. These winds blow from easterly direction. That is why their other name. Okay, they are also known as polar easterlies. Now first of all, under this topic wind, children, we studied about what is wind. Okay, then we studied that winds can be broadly classified into two types, permanent winds and local winds. Under permanent winds, we studied about the three types of permanent winds, that is the trade winds, the westerlies and the polar winds. Now talking about the local winds. Now children, talking about the local winds. Now what are local winds, children? Local winds arise due to local or regional changes which are taking place in the temperature or pressure. Okay, and they affect small areas, and that too for a short period of time. Understood? Now next what they are telling, see in the same paragraph. Some of the local winds, children, like they are giving you an example, land and sea breezes, okay, and monsoons, they are periodic. Periodic winds means they change their direction periodically with the change in the season. Okay, for a fixed period, which may be a day also or it may be a season also, they blow in a particular direction for a fixed period. But they are also adding up, see, but unlike prevailing winds, that means the permanent winds, they do not always blow in the same direction. It is not always that they blow in the same direction. Only for a fixed period they blow in a particular direction. Understood? That is why they are periodic. Now children, land and sea breezes. See what they are telling is, water, it takes longer time in comparison to land to get heated also, and to cool down also water takes more time. Okay, so during the daytime the land becomes hotter early in comparison to sea. Okay, what happens is the air above the land, it becomes hot. Okay, and then it rises, which leads to low pressure over the land. Next, in the same paragraph, see they are telling that since the air above the sea, now we are talking about the sea, okay, the air which is above the sea is cooler, the pressure over the sea is higher because the air is cooler. Okay, so the cooler air from the sea, that cool air, children, from the sea, it moves towards the land, okay, during the daytime. Now this breeze called sea breeze brings down the temperature in coastal areas during the daytime. So in the last sentence, what they are trying to tell, children, this breeze, what is this breeze known as? It is known as sea breeze. Okay, so when this cool air moves from the sea towards the land, it helps in keeping the temperature of the coastal areas down, okay, during the daytime. Okay, you feel pleasant over there. This was about the daytime. Now in the next paragraph, they are talking about the night. At night, the land cools down much faster than the sea. As I told you earlier also, that water takes longer time in both the process, in heating up also and in cooling down also. So during the night also, the land cools down earlier in comparison to sea, or you can say the land cools down much faster in comparison to sea. Okay, so then what happens is, now this process, children, is totally opposite to the daytime. Okay, now what happens is the air which is over the sea is warmer and lighter. So this warm air which is there over the sea, it rises. Okay, and the pressure over the sea is lower in comparison to the pressure which is there on the land. So what happens is air from the land blows towards the sea. Okay, as I told you, it's totally the opposite of the daytime. Okay, so this is known as the land breeze. Now under local winds, children, we studied about land and sea breezes. Okay, now talking about the monsoon. Okay, we don't have to go in much detail, but few things which you have to remember is the monsoon is a seasonal wind. How? See, it blows in a fixed direction. During a particular season, it blows in a fixed direction. But with the change of season, children, it reverses its direction. Okay, and these monsoons are like land and sea breezes on a large scale, which we did just now. We studied about the sea breeze, land breeze right now, right? Now talking about cyclonic winds, children. These winds, they are very irregular, okay, and they blow for a short duration. Now how are they caused? They are caused by the pressure systems known as cyclones and anticyclones. Now what are they? See in the next paragraph. Now in a cyclone, you might have heard about this term cyclone earlier also, right? In a cyclone, what happens? Strong winds are blowing. Okay, that too in a spiral, and they blow towards which area? Low pressure area at the center. And these cyclones, children, when they come, they bring heavy rains, and they can cause damage to the places from where these winds, these cyclones are passing. Understood? Now talking about the anticyclone winds, children. They are opposite to the cyclone. Cyclone winds are strong winds. Okay, whereas anticyclone winds are gentle winds. Okay, they blow from high pressure area at the center to the low pressure area. Then in cyclone winds, we discussed that they bring heavy rains and they can cause damage also to the places from where they pass. But here in anticyclone winds, children, they bring stable weather, okay, and clear skies. Stable weather, children, it means sthir mausam, okay. And if I talk about the clear sky, now what is the meaning of clear sky? Sky which is free from darkness, okay, which is free from dullness or clouds. So I think the difference between the two, cyclone and anticyclone, is clear in your mind. Cyclone are strong winds, whereas anticyclone are gentle winds. And what all things they cause, that we have discussed, okay. Now talking about the super cyclone. Now children, which is the most cyclone hit regions of the world? The eastern coast of India, okay. And cyclones that develop over Bay of Bengal, they generally strike this region. During which months? During the months of May, October and November. See, it is written here, okay. Now one such cyclone named the super cyclone hit the state of Odisha on 28 October 1999. Here they are talking about one such cyclone, okay. Now that cyclone, children, was named as the super cyclone, and it hit which state? It hit the state of Odisha, and the date also is given on 28th October 1999. Here in the picture also, children, they have shown, see, that How much damage can a cyclone cause? Okay, you can see in the picture. Then they are telling that what was the speed of the wind? Wind speeds reached up to 300 kilometers per hour during a super cyclone. Okay, and the region which was hit by the cyclone was inhabited mostly by poor people, poor fishermen. Okay, and where did these poor fishermen live? They lived in thatched huts. So you can imagine how much destruction the cyclone must have caused. Now, as these poor fishermen lived in thatched huts, because of super cyclone children, their homes were easily destroyed, okay, by these strong winds and the flood. Flood means baadh. Okay, more than 10,000 people and large number of domestic animals, okay, were killed. So just imagine how much damage it caused. Okay, about 15 million people were left homeless. They were now not having their homes were destroyed. Okay, and just see the number, 15 million people were left homeless. Vast areas of farmland were flooded, causing a huge loss of crops. Large areas, large farmlands, they were flooded. Okay, they were totally destroyed. Okay, and this caused a huge loss of crops. Now in the next paragraph, children, they are telling that the weather office, they had given the warnings, they had forecasted this thing, okay, before the cyclone actually struck. So they had already given the warnings, but proper steps were not taken to move the people who were living in nearby areas to a safe place. And many people out of these were poor fishermen. Now these poor fishermen children, they were already having the idea of the warnings which were given by the weather office, okay, but they were ignoring these warnings because they could not afford to lose the day's catch. Okay, so they had to go for fishing. Also they are telling that Odisha's coastal forests had been cleared. Okay, if they had not been cleared, then the damage would have been less, far less in comparison to the damage which took place actually. With this, children, we come to an end of this chapter. End of session. Hope you all enjoyed it. See you in the next lecture.